Welcome to another episode of Grace Under Pressure. Today, my guest is Jim Haudan, CEO of Root Inc. Grace Under Pressure, it's a LinkedIn Live interview show that poses questions to thought leaders and doers whose ideas and actions are helping us come to a greater understanding of ourselves and the opportunities that await us. Grace Under Pressure reveals what's too often dismissed as the soft stuff, the caring, the connecting, the commitment we feel toward others. Grace for me is generosity we show, respect we give, and compassion we demonstrate. Doing it as a leader, especially in challenging times, requires the ability to act for others and energize everyone around us. And that's why Jim Haudan, who is a CEO, is such a perfect guest. And Jim plays a dual role in the sense that he runs his company, Root Inc., which is highly reputable. That sounds almost backhand comment. Excuse me. Recognized as one of the great places to work in our country. So that's great. But also Jim is a CEO, but he also advises CEOs and organizations because that's the role of Root Inc. So welcome, Jim.
John, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to join you, and I appreciate all you're doing to help people in times of crisis.
Well, great. I want to tell a little bit about you. You are also an author, a couple of books, Art of Engagement, which tells the story of Root Inc., and also your brand newest, What Are Your Blind Spots? And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Jim, you're a terrific speaker, and so much so, my wife and I are talking about guests and things like that, and I mentioned some folks, and I mentioned your name. She goes, I know Jim. I've heard him speak. He's fantastic. So anyway, back when we did speak in public, I hope we get there again. But anyway, you are an accomplished speaker, but also a thought leader and an advisor and a CEO. So welcome, Jim. What are you hearing from executives, Jim? What are they telling you about what they're worried about? What are you hearing?
Well, I think the three things that seem to be on the minds and the lips of every senior executive that I'm familiar with is first and foremost the safety of their people. I think we're in times that are really unprecedented, and that word's been used a lot. But I think it suggests that we're learning more each day in terms of what do we, as leaders of our organizations, need to do to make sure that our people are safe. And so I think that's the first issue. I think the second one for a lot of leaders, it's the viability and sustainability of the business. I mean, I think, there are some organizations we're working with, some in pharma, others in food service that, are really being stretched. But there's a lot of businesses and a lot of organizations that the business just isn't what it was. And so they're really trying to figure out, as we are, how do you sustain a business in light of some significant downturns and a lot of uncertainty? And then I think the third thing is, job retention. I think a lot of senior leaders, know what it means to know that the job is there for their people, and they, at the end of it, it's probably the greatest fear that a lot of their people have, and that is, what if I do lose my opportunity to work in this organization? So those would be the three: safety and health of their people. Number two, the viability and sustainability of their business. And three, job retention, job preservation.
Those are significant issues and things that would keep people up at night. As you discuss such fears, what counsel do you share with them, Jim?
Yeah, it's really a good question, John. I think the first thing I think we often suggest is that, don't ignore the anxiety of your people, because it'll just intensify it. How do you really spend time understanding what people think and feel? Empathy is probably one of the most important things at these times. People just want to be validated in some sense, so that they can know that what they're thinking and feeling is okay, that it's normal, that others feel that way. But we even in our organization, we're having weekly sessions where people just come on in small groups and get a chance to express what they're feeling, what they're going through. And so I think more than ever we need to do that. The second thing we tell a lot about is define reality. There's this whole concept that people can't handle the truth, and we found just the opposite. people are immensely resilient to the truth. What they can't handle is the unknown. And so, if we begin to share with people exactly where we stand and exactly what we're trying to accomplish and exactly how we're doing against what we're trying to accomplish, they can really feel that you're being transparent and honest with them. And I think that's more important than ever. I think the third one, which is something that we tell a lot about, John, is we just often have to create a new starting line. It's just a common human trait to focus on what we lost. Whether that loss was a promotion, whether that loss was a bonus, whether that loss was the opportunity to try and experiment with new things, an investment. All of those things may be shortened or stalled, and I know even in our business, some of the things we're talking about, probably it'll be a year and a half to 2 years before we might get to some of the things that we were very accustomed to at the end of 2019. So if you really focus on what you've lost, you can't create new, and you can't reorient. And I think that's really important. So that new starting line. I think we also ask people to use this urgency as an alignment tool. But there's even something more important, John. And I just got off a call with a CEO on this issue, and that is, some of the best performers and some of the most resilient leaders we've ever seen see every adversity as a gift. And so you have to ask, what's the gift in this adversity that we wouldn't had available to us if things would have been continuing just as normal? And so within that adversity, within that conflict, within that discomfort, there is always a gift to look at things differently, to see things differently, to try new and different things. So I think that's important. And maybe the last one is, you just want to really almost deputize your people as opportunity scouts. If there is a gift in this environment and there are new ways to take advantage of supporting and serving other people, what does that look like? Cisco's one of our big clients, and they early on began to provide grocery displays at restaurants. And so restaurants that were really struggling had a way not only to sell meals, but groceries. And it's just one example of how the opportunities emerge that we really want to empower our people to help us see those and scout them out and decide how to take advantage of them.
I know I like that opportunity scouts thing. I've thought that crisis brings out opportunity for people to shine. As hot coffee makes cream rise, and I think this thing with adversity. And I loved your concept about adversity as a gift. I haven't quite heard it expressed as a gift, but how are you seeing that gift in your own business?
Well, I think probably the first and foremost area in our own business is that our business causes a lot of people to come together, leadership teams to come together. Large organizations may bring together anywhere from 400 to 14,000 people to sort of talk about their strategy, to talk about critical initiatives, to co-think the challenges they face. That's not happening. So the gift right now for us is, how do we use virtual and digital to create the connections between people that used to be in person? And we've really accelerated how we're doing that. We're experimenting, and we're finding ways to almost have conferences of 200 to 400 leaders virtually. And how do you do that so it's engaging, so it doesn't just feel like you're being broadcast to? And so those are new skills we're creating, new models, new approaches, and without this pandemic, we clearly wouldn't have progressed as much as we have on that whole area.
Okay. One of the reasons I think you have such depth as a CEO, Jim, is that you have been through adversity well prior to this pandemic. So what lessons does that enable you to bring to the business now, but also to share with your clients?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's a question that's very personal for me, John. I bought out a partner, so I'm really the co-founder of Root, and so in 2000 we bought him out and borrowed quite a few millions of dollars to do that, and then the world went downhill. I mean, we had a recession in the early 2001. We had 9/11. And so we had a lot of debt, and we had a lot of reduction. I think our debt was higher than our revenue. And so, I think when you get into that adversity, you know, as I look back, what really was clear is the fear of what people would think if we didn't continue as a business just totally took me over. I mean, it's this, it's there's a great book written by a woman in Australia about the 5 regrets of the dying. And the first regret and the most prominent regret is that I wish I would have lived a life that I knew I wanted to live for me rather than the one that I thought others wanted me to live. And so I think when you get into this fear and you start to catastrophize what might happen, if you get caught up in terms of what will people think of me, or what will happen, in ways that I'm not as good as I think I am, I really think you stop being the best version of yourself. And so I still remember there was one day when a coach told me, I said, I'm drowning in all this debt and all this uncertainty and all this, pessimism of we aren't going to survive this. And I said, I just can't breathe, and the coach was very thoughtful. He said, you're now with a new partner. In this case, it was a bank who had let us borrow the $16 million. And he said, you just want to think about this. Your new partner is a bit more collaborative, a bit more flexible than your old. And just think of it that way in terms of what you wanted to create. And it was almost like the week later that I began to figure out what could we do versus what had happened to me. And so I think that has been a lesson that's been really clear, and that is, really focus still in terms of not what other people might think, but what can I do? And in our creative and our immense abilities and possibilities, and then others will join you. But if you're, sort of just lamenting your situation, and a lot of people told me that I trusted, just file bankruptcy, and you made a bad decision, a bad time. But
Right.
that was bad advice. I think, there's a lot of capability in all of us in the worst of times that comes to the forefront if we just decide to focus on what we control versus what we can't.
I know, and I'm glad you shared this story of adversity, because I think that every senior leader, Warren Bennis wrote about this eloquently, that he had never met a senior leader who had not experienced the crucible, then some crisis, and those leaders came through it, and it makes them better, stronger, and I also think it makes them more effective as a leader of others. How would you comment on that, Jim?
Well, I think so. You and I have talked separately more recently about the Stockdale Principle, which was all about this concept of somebody that went to prisoner of war and basically, would have used a service revolver on himself if he knew what he was going to go through, and wouldn't let any of his family go through it, or any of his friends. And then there's a pause, and the next line is, "But I wouldn't trade it for anything." And so I think what happens when you go through something like this, you really get to decide what you really care about, what really matters. There's a certain crucible that occurs. That why are we doing what we're doing, and how important is it really? And you get a chance to really not only recommit yourself and revise it if it's not really that powerful, but other people rally around that. And they begin to say, the purpose of what we're doing becomes more prominent than ever. And then the question you ask is this purpose worth it? And if you answer yes, again, people rise to the occasion in face of that adversity. And if you answer no, that's a good thing too, because maybe that needs to change. But for us, the answer was yes. And we responded, tremendously to the challenge, and have been very successful, despite that moment in time when there was a lot of chances that we wouldn't be.
Great. You are the author of a new book with your colleague, Rich Behrens. It's called, position it here, Blind Spots. And I've asked you to bring it and read a passage that is important to you, and we'll have a discussion about it.
Yeah, it's I think it's a passage that is really important in all times, John, but it's probably more important in the times we're in now. But it's really about authentic conversations, and the passage goes like this. It says, understanding and appreciating that authentic dialogue, rich conversations are required to enable change in a crucial way to resolve the blind spot around engagement. And it says dialogue is the root of all effective engagement and the only pathway to authentically engage the hearts and minds of people. After 25 years of observing people at every level of all kinds of organizations, from the front line to the senior team, we can say there is one observation in particular that is a game changer when it comes to any leader's assumptions and beliefs about their people. And that game changer is that people will tolerate the conclusions of their leaders, but they'll act on their own. And so, engaging people in the co-thinking, co-exploration, co-examination, co-creation of the business is the only way that they may suspend some of their assumptions and challenges or conclusions about the business and change their behaviors. It cannot be through a direct tell and sell. And so, we've really got to find in these times, how do we see our people as creative of our response to the challenges we face, not just implementers of a decision somebody in a corner or a corner office made. And so, I can't tell you how many times I've seen leaders dumbfounded at the untapped intelligence of their people when we brought the essential drama of the business to them and authentically asked them to help us solve those dramas.
I think that message, that advice is so relevant today because in our virtual world, in some ways, we're more connected. At least we have a voice, and through your leadership and your counsel to you, your peer, your fellow CEOs and other senior leaders, that people are sharing their ideas. And so I like that you word you use, co-create, co-think, giving people a voice. And that's rooted in trust. And I know trust is one of the bedrock principles that you write about. And it's so essential, but we're all in this together. And when we have a shared fortune, it's up to us to co-create it and make it go forward. So that's very wise counsel. So I want to ask you, as we're coming down to the end of our show, an example of grace in your life or that you've seen. What do you reply to that, Jim?
Well, there are so many examples I can think of. I just thought of one when you asked that has always touched me. And, we have founded our organization on the concept of servant leadership, and our goal is to be of service to our clients. And it comes out of this sense that it's a privilege to serve another human being, to make them smarter, more capable, more confident, which is a little bit unique for a consulting organization because there tends to be sort of this expertise banner that's hung somewhere in the halls that we know best, and I think we've avoided that. But there was a woman who we were serving at one of the large hotel chains, and I still remember our teams really helped this leader with their franchise meetings year in and year out, and it really transformed the relationship they had with the franchisees, and so I was just stunned one day when what showed up was a box on our in our mail room, and it had these books. And so what this woman had done is she had hired an artist, she had hired a writer, and she wrote a book about her experience with our people. And so the book, had all the characters were our people, and they were turned into cartoon characters, and the story of our relationship and how grateful she was for the relationship was the story within the book. And and when you look at that, you just think about, it was really our privilege to serve you, but the reciprocal nature of being served is you want to serve back. And then when you take the time to do something so special, literally to author a book about people that had really been part of her relationship in our organization, I just, it was stunning. I still look at that and and feel sort of just immense gratitude for the way that she took care of letting our people all know the difference that they made in their organization and also in her life. And so that was just one example of, and I can give you about 10 or 15 more where people just were immensely grateful and showed that in ways that just had stunning impact on our own folks.
Well, what a wonderful, beautiful story of that book. And it proves a point that I've argued that others, I've borrowed from others. Grace is generative. When we
Yeah.
give it, you receive something in return as well. It's not why we do it, but it is generative. And good leaders spread that for grace around the organization to create tighter connections. So, Jim, this has been a terrific conversation. And tell people how we can find you, your website, your
Sure.
firm.
Sure. It's, of course, www.rootinc.com. So root as in the tree root, inc.com. And, that's the simplest way to find us. And as you mentioned, John, if you do find us, there are a lot of materials. We've take a lot of notes, and we're vivacious students. So, there's a lot that we share on that website that hopefully might be helpful to the folks that are really trying to lead in these challenging times.
That's great. I do love your website, and it is a wealth of information, and I encourage people to visit, and we'll put a link in the video. Jim, it's been terrific. I appreciate you spending time with me today. We're going to go into our outro, and I say thank you.
Thank you so much, John.